Hello everyone, and this is NLP Radio on Air. We are very glad to introduce our usual guest. Alexander Gerasimov is today with us. Good afternoon, Alexander.
Hello.
I will remind that Alexander Gerasimov is a well-known NLP trainer in Russia, a negotiator, and the author of trainings in 22 countries and 70 cities. It's really impressive. I have been myself on lots of international seminars and trainings of Alexander, and still I have been learning from him. And I'm really beneficial and privileged to have this opportunity to interview him today. And the topic will be emotions. It's a huge topic, very vast. So we will discuss how many basic emotions there are, what's the difference of emotions and feelings, and other nuances and details. So let's get started.
Всем привет.
Well, hello everyone. This is quite a big topic, as it was mentioned, and it can be an almost endless discussion. It is a topic that always touches people. From a variety of points of view, it is not only about how to recognize and understand what a person feels at a moment, how to identify emotions he has or she has, and understand whether they are sincere. But it is also a rather serious issue of managing your own emotions and those of others. Very often it happens that emotions control a person and not vice versa. And what can we do if a person has this or that state in which he would not like to be? It doesn't matter what these can be the so-called bad emotions, such as anger, irritation, or relatively good emotions, joy, excitement, interest. I want to state it clearly that there are no bad or good emotions. Any emotion is useful in a certain context. You will agree that there are situations when you need to feel anger and when you can't feel joy. And the most important thing here is whether it is the right place and time for experiencing such emotions.
Let's call it suitable for the context. Appropriate emotion in the context. Alexander, and to start with, actually, how many basic emotions are there? Do we distinguish?
In Paul Ekman's classic work on basic emotions, there are 7 of them. In fact, these are different classifications that can be found on Wikipedia. Their number ranges from 4 to 17 basic emotions, and you can easily choose the one you like most. I like this idea with 7, maybe because the number is beautiful. There's the same number of notes in music, the same number of colors in a rainbow. Well, why not? There are 7 basic emotions from which then other emotions appear. For example, we can change one parameter, such as intensity. Let's say anger is of average intensity, then rage is of stronger intensity, and irritation is a lower intensity of anger. It is similar to light and its saturation. There is just basic red, which is associated with anger, by the way, and it can be brighter or paler. This is first of all. Secondly, emotions can be connected with each other, and they turn into such chemical emotional cocktails. For example, we can combine the basic emotion of anger and sadness. Thus, you will get the emotion of resentment or annoyance, another name for it. And the third point here is changing emotions by adding prefixes and suffixes. In Russian, this is especially noticeable. You can say "печаль," which means sadness, or "печалька," that is a smaller thing, it is a small sadness, or "гнев," гневливость, разгневанность. There are anger, irascibility, and curiosity correspondingly. So Linguistically, we seem to add more gradations, nuances, details, shades within this emotion, and the one who listens to us understands that, even if we don't discuss that, because it is intuitively clear to a person that печалька, well, it is a small sadness, and it lasts shorter time, and печаль, it is a big sadness. It is longer state.
I must say that in European languages we don't have such tools, unfortunately, to express those shades of emotions. The only thing we can do is to add an adjective. For instance, say sorrow, light sorrow, little sorrow, but it's not the same as adding suffixes. Adding suffixes and prefixes are much more expressive and louder speaking than adding just characteristical adjectives. So Russian language is richer in that respect, definitely. Let's move on.
Yes, we have basic emotions. Paul Ekman once conducted a great experiment. He took more than 10,000 students and used different stimuli to evoke different emotions in them. The students reacted. He recorded it all on video and took pictures. It turned out that there were 7 basic emotions. Well, actually, there are 7 basic emotions that are characteristic of every mentally healthy person. They serve as a basis for other states. Stimuli can cause different emotions, whereas a person can show them in a similar way. These emotions may demonstrate a cultural difference, like in different countries such as Bali, Japan, Russia, and in Europe. Death is treated differently. In Russia, this is a very tragic event. In Bali, it is treated more easily, and the same event will cause different emotions depending on a person's culture. This is true for different life situations. Imagine there are 5 people sitting together. A man passes in front of them, stumbles and then falls. It can be noticed that almost each will react differently to this. Someone will smile, another will be scared, some will rush to help, others will ignore, turn away, and so on. So the same situation can cause different emotions.
However, I think that not only different people will react differently to the same trigger, for instance, falling down man. I also believe that one and the same person will react differently depending on his mood and depending on his state at this moment. For instance, if he feels weak, depressed, gloomy, he will pay no attention. If he is elated and in high spirits, the same accident can cause laughter or a smile within the same person.
It will also depend on the upbringing of a person, because it also imposes certain filters. The reaction may depend not only on their states, but also on what they have been talking about before it happened. It would also depend on what kind of person felt. Generally, the difference may be between a man in a suit or a child or a girl, and yes, it will be a different reaction every time.
Or an elderly pensioner, for instance. Okay.
Therefore, despite a limited number of emotions, the manifestation of each emotion is quite diverse.
Okay. What are they? Shall we enumerate them, probably? What are those basic emotions?
Yes, let's write them down. The first emotion is joy. It's when something happens that a person doesn't expect. Joy is an emotion that arises when a person's value is unexpectedly realized. The opposite emotion of joy is the emotion of disgust. Note, not sadness or sorrow, as it would seem, but disgust. Disgust is a violation of a meaningful and associated criterion. Even in short, let's say the distance is important to you. Suddenly, a person enters a full elevator and stands next to you. At this moment, there is such a slight disgust. If in the street, for example, a person comes up with a very unpleasant smell, then this emotion will manifest itself even more intensively. The violation of a significant associated criterion.
You say associated criteria. For our listeners, what does that mean, associated criteria, to understand better?
That is the one that concerns you directly. Well, let's say it's the distance to your smells or your comfort. These are the associated criteria. These can also be dissociated criteria, for example, let me think for a moment. We've considered a significant and therefore associated criterion. But when comfort doesn't mean much to a person and when comfort is violated, then he will not react in this way. He may be angry, he may be sad, but he will not be disgusted.
I think he can feel confused. A lot of girls, when an unknown man comes up closely and approaches, feel confusion and start blushing, but not disgust.
Let's look at the reaction of that person, and there will be certainly the signs of disgust. So if, for example, a nice person is approaching and you potentially don't mind him being close, then there may be just shyness, modesty. But if an unpleasant person is approaching, then at this moment the upper lip strains, and it's as if the person becomes all strain and builds borders around himself. The third emotion is anger. This is when a significant value is under threat, and this threat needs to be eliminated. So when it concerns a comfortable distance, when someone comes close to you and you say, "Move away from me, move away." Oddly enough, at this moment it is anger. You protect your borders to eliminate this threat.
Okay, may I come in with a question here? I believe anger is not only what you have just said, that it's a threat to... would you please repeat? It's a threat to what again? Anger? Could you please repeat the definition of anger once again?
Anger arises when a significant value is under a threat that can be eliminated. There is a threat. It can be eliminated. These are forces and resources for a person to do that.
I'm sorry, I just omitted it. So a threat to our significant value. However, and we need to somehow remove this threat, right? As for me, I feel anger when somebody's behaving stupid. When I explain like 100 times a taxi driver, for instance, and he's behaving stupid, here is where my anger switches on. It's not a threat to my value, is it?
I see. For example, there is a value of high-quality communication and the ability to manage this communication, or lack of communication, or understanding as a value, a contact as a value. And at some moment, this contact cannot be established. A driver or another person is confused or too slow to answer a question or says a wrong thing. And at this moment, one wants to or even interrupt this contact, and then anger arises. The consequences of anger are not necessarily nonverbal aggression, such as pushing away or hitting. It can be verbal aggression. People may shout when in conflict, but this is also aggression. These are the very attempts to protect their borders, their values.
Okay. I've never looked at it from this side. Okay, right. So
It's just that there it can be called anger in its purest form.
irritation, I think.
That is less intense anger, which could be possible if a Taxi driver, for example, had such a goal to make you mad. From time to time, a video appears in TikTok and other social networks where a girl and a man riding in a taxi are yelling at the taxi driver, and they shout from their hearts with all their might. And this is the very moment when anger is being accumulated somewhere, and here it breaks out.
Okay.
Противоположная эмоция гневу.
The opposite emotion of anger is sadness. Sadness is the loss of meaningful value. It's a fundamental difference. Let's say you get out of your taxi and suddenly notice that your gloves left in the car and driving away, or it may happen in the subway. And there are two possible reactions here. You can understand that the value is under a threat and you can eliminate this threat. You start actively calling, searching, running for the taxi or doing something else. If, for example, the gloves are left on the subway train, then the probability that you will stop the train is, well, minimal. There is nowhere to call. Searching for gloves is hardly worth doing. Then sadness appears, loss. There is nothing to do about it. And you can notice how at this moment this person would slump, relax, exhale, and become less energetic, like that figure of the famous Ждун. Maybe you do know it.
I'm not sure if we can explain it in English. In our memes and in different jokes and anecdotes on Instagram, Facebook, and everywhere, we can find such an image, a picture of a waiter, the so-called awaiting figure, extremely funny, ridiculous, such a fat figure with lots of wrinkles and very funny face. So Alexander is talking of him right now. It's a great thing you are giving definitions now, not just description. For instance, a threat to a significant value, losing a significant value. It makes it more and more understandable, surely. And in English, I believe this is expressed much better. We don't have something like snikать, but in English we would say feeling down. Just simply feeling down or feeling low. I think it's a great expression of this state. It's very understandable.
The unconscious seems to send a signal to the body. That's it. You can't do anything about it. Relax, and it turns off your energy. In case of anger, on the contrary, there's such an oxygen pump and the person gets energized and ready to fight, run, reach, overcome. While in case of sadness, it's just as if it is turned off and you lose energy. This is the force emotion. We get such a bundle here, where joy means becoming closer, disgust is a separation, anger is your tonus going up, sadness is your energy going down. It turns out like this, and there are two similar emotions. Their manifestations are sometimes confusing, but the fundamental difference is very noticeable. There are fear and surprise. Fear is when a significant value is under a threat that cannot be eliminated. In case of anger, it can be eliminated. In case of fear, it cannot. An example could be the last year's lockdown, when we were sitting at home constantly, intimidated by the mass disinformation. They said so many people died there, so many people died here, the virus was all around in the street. They'd closed everything, the economy would collapse. We didn't know about what's next, so people stayed at home and scared as mice. And pay attention to facial expressions. There is even a saying in the Russian language, fear has big eyes and a crooked mouth. I wonder if there are any equivalent in English.
No. It's typically Russian. I will translate the Russian proverb that fear has got huge eyes. and indistinctive mouth shape. But I think we are not able to deliver word for word this idea. Okay.
И похожие по внешним проявлениям.
And similar in appearance in the emotion of surprise. When something happens that was not in a human experience, and then this person is surprised, his eyes also widen. In case of fear, it's such a tensed opening of the eyes, as if you want to open them to get more information, and close them in order to see, well, not to see anything. So the lower eyelid is tense in fear, and on the forehead the eyebrows are tensed straight. The eyebrows go up. Take photos from a preview of some horror movie, where a close-up of one of the actors' faces is shown, where we see such tensed open eyes, and such a slightly distorted mouth. In contrast to surprise, where the eyes are just open and the eyebrows are half-arched and calmly rise up. Take, for example, the preview of the movie Home Alone, where Macaulay Culkin is depicted with such an amazed face of a child. Now, Macaulay Culkin, of course, is not a surprise at all, but he is a surprising figure himself.
Где Маколей Калкин как раз изображен с таким удивленным лицом ребенка. То, что сейчас с Маколеем Калкиным, конечно, это вообще не удивление, он сам уже собой вызывает удивление.
Yeah. It's an internationally known movie that I'm sure everyone has watched, so definitely it's a great recognizable example.
И лицо Маколея Калкина...
Macaulay Culkin's face is just such a really native, childish, surprisingly relaxed face where the eyebrows are raised straight up and the mouth is slightly open, relaxed, and everything is symmetrical. In fear, the face is tensed, but in surprise, the mouth is open and the speech is stopped.
Okay. Very academical. Great, okay, understandable. I think our radio listeners are expecting maybe some life examples or maybe tools how to not to manage those emotions. It's too early for this. Probably in the next podcast, managing emotions. However, how to differentiate them at least one from another, or how to cause them, those emotions.
И седьмая
And the seventh basic emotion, which is, by the way, peculiar only to human, is contempt. Contempt and disgust are often confused. Disgust, in this case, is a kind of turning away and unwillingness to get involved. Contempt shows that I am better than you, I'm doing better, I've probably got more money, I've got a better job, or something like that, and it is accompanied by just such a vertical asymmetry. It's either a smirk in green or a raised eyebrow, and it seems that the person is evaluating. Sometimes one rests his chin on his hand and looks at it with a little tilt, as if studying. But, well, in conversation, this can manifest itself as a grin, when the simple shifts to the left and to the right. But it's not even a smile, it's only the line of the mouth. Then this person tells you something and you hear a characteristic jazz note in this intonation. He says, or and then starts speaking. The person demonstrates, I'm better than you. It's a kind of competition, as if two businessmen meet and tell each other how they're doing. Or it is very probable in Russia when classmates gather 10, 20 years later. It turns out to be kind of Vanity Fair, where everyone boasts about what he has achieved or she has achieved in comparison with others. And those who believe that they are better, they may show contempt for those who are worse.
A different associational row when you said classmates or typically Russian, I imagined Armenian mothers, Armenian women, mothers, that gather together having coffee. First of all, they look in cups of coffee, predicting future, and then they started saying, how about your daughter? How did she get married? Oh, she had married to a very rich guy. How about your daughter? My daughter has got married to a richer guy, and your daughter and mine has got a great career and is married to the richest guy and got already 2 kids, and such an Armenian party of mothers. This is, I believe, exactly this illustration.
Да, и
And a person finds himself in this comparison below the others. It is very natural to try to prove the opposite, but if it is impossible to prove this in terms of money, for example, then they come up with some other value system and try to broadcast it.
But it has nothing to do with dominating, does it?
да, это
Dominating is more anger, am I right? Not contempt so much.
если соединить.
If you connect this, a person has anger and he is being led by this provocation, then of course he will try to prove it. If this person turns out to be involved in business, then he can easily climb the career ladder. This is probably also a typical Russian notion, panty, that are acts of showing off, when a person wants to show someone else that he can be the first to buy iPhone 13, even when why and what for cannot be explained by the reason, and he puts it on the table in front of his friends. This is done to show your exclusivity in consumption. By overpaying for panty, just to show off. There is an ironic Russian set phrase, a good show-off is more valuable than money. These are just attempts to create an impression by showing your coolness to other people.
Okay. Alexander, is there anything else which is important to be said within this idea of presenting 7 basic emotions and their representation? Is there anything else? Or probably all the rest stuff we can leave to specification and managing to another podcast? What would you say?
Да, я предлагаю в следующем подкасте.
Then, yes, I suggest in the next podcast considering them is more detail. What to do with them, how to deal with them, and which other emotions they may turn into, how they manifest, and what they mean. In this podcast, we've just got to know them and understood that they exist. I would ask our listeners, please write in English in the comments all the emotions that you know. How many will you get in total? We wrote in Russian during our training and we got a list of 118 emotions. But it's in Russian. In English, you can get much more or less. Surprise us so that we got the emotion of a surprise.
Yeah, that could be amazing. Please do that. And as well, while I was listening to Alexander, I caught myself at a thought which my basic emotions are, 1 or 2. If you have distinguished yours, you are very welcome to share as well. So, likes and reposts are always welcome. Thank you so much, Alexander. And we hear each other at the next podcast.
Goodbye.
Bye.